has upset Prabhupada. Let me give you an example. We had an interesting conversation once, a group of us with Rabindranath Swarup, and the topic of cooperation came up. And Prabhupada has said enough things about cooperation that if you read all those things, you can understand it's centrally important in Prabhupada's mind. Because as you study what Prabhupada says, you can see that basically there won't be a movement if we don't cooperate. So he said cooperation is the most important thing because, as Prabhupada always said, you can destroy ISKCON from within. So obviously, if you destroy ISKCON, you don't have ISKCON. And so not destroying ISKCON is pretty important. You agree? Yeah, okay. But what Prabhupada's saying is cooperation is what's going to not, if we have cooperation, it won't destroy. So it's another way of saying not destroying ISKCON is important, or we'll just say cooperating is important, most important. So the argument against this is, but why should I cooperate if you're wrong? Why should I cooperate with you if you're wrong? That would go against my integrity, and that would be wrong. I'd be doing something Prabhupada didn't want. And so Rabindranath said something interesting. He's, I asked him the question. I said, but, what if something is not Siddhanta? It's not truth. Shouldn't I oppose it? And shouldn't I non-cooperate? What if I don't cooperate? And he said, when you're talking about what's true, we can see it that cooperating is a higher truth. It's an interesting concept, right? But if you ever saw how displeased Prabhupada was when we didn't cooperate, you would cooperate. That's if you ever were like in the room and someone didn't cooperate, that would be enough to jar you for the rest of your life to cooperate with anybody and everyone, even if they're 100% wrong, as long as they're not going to be just, as long as it's not going to be destructive. You would say, okay, I'll cooperate. I'll apologize. I'll do anything just so we get along because this will please Prabhupada. So, and by doing that, you get Prabhupada's mercy. And then by having that mercy, then you understand Krishna and you advance in Krishna consciousness. So that's the idea Prabhupada's explaining here. And of course, the topic is Balaram's mercy. And whenever Prabhupada talks about Balaram, he talks about spiritual strength. You get your spiritual strength from Balaram. Well, how do you get it? How is it transmitted? What do you have to do to get it? Well, you can say, yes, chant Hare Krishna, do all these things. But at the same time, if you can do all these things properly, but at the same time, you could do something which would kind of turn off the floodgates of mercy by offending a Vaisnava, for example. Offending Srila Prabhupada, doing something that would hurt Srila Prabhupada, make him unhappy. So it's kind of like scales, Okay, I chanted good rounds and then I offended a devotee. The scales are back to zero. I offended a devotee. Okay, I chanted good rounds. We get it back to zero. That concept. So it's not a material process. And even if you think, well, if I chant good rounds, if I rise early, I read Bhagavatam, I'll become Krishna conscious. And even if you can support that, the point is, without Krishna's agreeing, you can't be Krishna conscious. Because Krishna, he could from within drive you away. Like you could be a disturbance to ISKCON and he could say, okay, I'm going to give you intelligence how to leave ISKCON because I don't want you in it because you're just bothering people. He could do that. It's possible, right? Because ultimately super soul is guiding us, right? So pleasing the Vaishnavas, pleasing your spiritual master, pleasing Srila Prabhupada, that brings tremendous mercy. Helping, as we said yesterday, helping others become Krishna conscious, or Monday, I think we mentioned, helping others become Krishna conscious brings you incredible amounts of mercy because Krishna is so pleased with that. And then Shastra says Impossible things become possible by mercy. And we are all mercy cases in the sense that we are Vaishnavas. We're sitting here wearing tilak, or thinking like Vaishnavas think, acting like Vaishnavas think. We're doing this every day. That's a proof of mercy, because without mercy, we wouldn't do that. We couldn't do that. We wouldn't have the strength, and we wouldn't have the intelligence, right? Do you ever wonder, like, if I wake up, do you ever go to bed at night and say, I hope when I wake up in the morning, I'm a devotee? I mean, it's like, you ever worry that you might do something like really crazy, Yeah. As long as you have the mercy, you won't do something crazy. I mean, I can't say you won't. There's always that possibility, but you won't do it long without coming back to your senses. You won't drag yourself away. That's the power of mercy. So the fact that someone is still here trying to be Krishna conscious, even though they may be failing to some degree, but they're trying, they're still chanting their rounds, they're still sincere and so forth. That's a sign that there's some mercy going on. And so we should always feel that the mercy is what's really making it all happen. And so I have to be really careful to get the mercy, because if I don't get it, then by my strength, I can't overcome them. Krishna, when Krishna says this, is a 14th verse, chapter 7. Daiviyeshu gunamai mama maya. My maya duratyaya is, you can't cross it. It's not like, well, maybe I could try. No, you can't. It's a certification. This is not crossable. No human being who is not Krishna conscious can cross it. You don't have to do any data research about it. Krishna's just certification. Here it is. If you want a contract, if you want an official document, 714 is the official document. Certified, you cannot cross over the material world. I was saying last week how one of my godbrothers was asked, how'd you become a devotee? He said, I don't know. It was a miracle. I can't, if I try to figure it out materially, it doesn't make any sense, right? Have you ever thought like this? Why did I become a devotee and none of my friends? Why did I become? Not my brother, not my sister. It's like, why me? My whole neighborhood, who became a devotee? Nobody. And for me, it's really strange, because the neighborhood I grew up in was like a 20-minute walk to the temple, which means a 5-minute drive. That means all my friends live within 5 minutes of the temple. And the devotees went out every day for 8 hours a day, 8 to 12 hours a day on the street in the city that I lived in since 1968. So all my friends were like, they couldn't miss it. And even I had some friends, they went to India after they graduated high school. I met him on Sankirtan. He had a tattoo of Krishna on his arm. And none of them became devotees. Hare Krishna, right? Does it mean they weren't intelligent? I had like super intelligent friends. Some like were geniuses, but not smart enough to become a devotee. How can you be a genius and not be smart enough to become a devotee? Because the mercy factor, isn't it? Like you can have this incredible intelligence, analytical mind, ability to go deeply into the philosophy of the Gita and Bhagavatam and not become a devotee. Like, no mercy. You can know everything and know nothing, isn't it? That would be a good title for a book or a talk. You know everything, but you know nothing. If I keep coming up with these statements, I'm going to have to become a Buddhist. They're all like, what does it mean? What did your teacher say? He said, you know everything, but you know nothing. Well, all of you can go around today. So I want to tell you what my teacher told me today. He said, you know everything, but you know nothing. And all your friends go, oh, cool. What does that mean? Oh, your teacher is cool. Anyway, we see this. So when you see a high level of knowledge, or you see a high level of renunciation, but you don't see devotion, what does it mean? It means in the equation, the mercy factor was missing. And so without the mercy factor, there's not the spiritual strength and realization you need to practice Krishna consciousness. There's the detachment and there's the knowledge, but it's not enough, because it's kind of like a car with a dead battery. There's your Porsche, whatever number they're up to now, I don't know. That can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds or 4 seconds. I actually did this in a Porsche. I wasn't driving it, but someone else was. And we went from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. That was a memorable experience. I think that's faster than an airplane, isn't it? I don't think airplane goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Anyway, but you're sitting in that Porsche and it has no battery. So it's like, it just sits there. It's like, it's got this amazing engine, it's amazing suspension. It's got everything. And the battery's dead. So you've got knowledge, you've got renunciation, you've got good birth. You're born in a Brahmin family. You went to school. You got your Brahmin initiation when you were 8. You got Gayatri. You learned Sanskrit. You know so many shlokas, and you're running after girls. Like, what happened? What went wrong? Oh, and let's do it the other way. You're a hippie, or whatever you call them now. I don't know what you call them now. You're following the Grateful Dead or something, trying to be a hippie, or you're going to Lollapalooza. You're a hippie for a weekend or whatever, or you're a Rasta for a weekend. And you've got like nothing going for you spiritually. And then you meet a devotee and they're doing a festival and you say, can I do some service? Oh yeah, help us. And you can cut the vegetables, you can clean the pots, and you do service. And the whole day you're just like absorbed chanting Hare Krishna. And you never even heard the Maha Mantra before, and you're chanting all day and you're happy doing service. How does that happen? And 3 weeks later, you're shaved up in a dhoti, happiest, happier than you've ever been, and like completely free of material desire. How does that happen? No qualification, right? Mercy. That's how mercy works. So, yeah, that's why when I've given many classes, it's a side point. I've given many classes on cooperation, and that's always my point. Like, how do you cooperate when you can't cooperate? Like, I can't cooperate with this person. Like, nobody can cooperate with this person. How do you do it? You say, one in the class today, one devotee, he was saying, Prabhupada was like a rose 90% of the time, and like a thunderbolt 10% of the time. And the devotee said, but if you ever saw the 10% thunderbolt, you would cooperate, because you know how displeased it makes Prabhupada. And if you got to witness that displeasure, you would never not cooperate. So how do you cooperate when you can't? It's because that pleases Prabhupada and you want to get his mercy. Right? Makes sense? So all of you that I'm looking at, and the ones that I'm not looking at on Facebook, and the ones who are going to see this later, this class later, if you are going on in Krishna consciousness fairly well, I mean, none of us are completely transcendental 24/7, but most of us are going on fairly well on a continuum of okay to like really good. We're in there. I mean, we're still here. We're coming to class. We're still, we got out of bed, did our sadhana, we're okay. So that means there's some mercy there. That means you're doing something right. That means you're not offending devotees, at least not too many, too often. And you're pleasing some devotees and you're sincere. That's what it means. And then, now that you've got the mercy, then you can understand Krishna. Otherwise, forget it. Like, I'll tell a story. Stories are, talk philosophy, you forget it all. In one ear, out the other. It goes in and you kind of get it, and then most of it gets washed out. But when you tell a story, it's like, it stays there, isn't it? Like, you know why? You want to know psychologically why? because stories arouse emotion, and whenever there's the higher the emotion, the more you remember. Did you know that? That's why we remember bad things also. We remember like the best things and the worst things, and everything in the middle is just one big blur, isn't it? Like, Annapurna, tell us what you were doing on this time 7 years ago. Like, it's all just a big blur, you know. They go, tell me something that was like a highlight of your life. It's like forefront. And I won't ask you to tell me something that was the worst thing that ever happened to you. But if I did, that would be forefront also, right? So that's why stories are so powerful. So I totally forgot the story I was going to tell you. Always happens to me. I do a preliminary explanation before I say something, and then I forget. Okay. So what did I say before? You got to trigger me with what I said before, right before I got sidetracked. Does anyone remember? This is actually, I didn't forget. It's just a test. Just prove that you're not listening, right? Who remembers? Tanya, you remember what I said right before I went off on a tangent? If you give me a few words, I will remember.
You were saying about the emotions, how when we have it as emotions, and you were going to tell a story about it.
Yeah, right before that sentence. The story has disappeared. That's because I didn't take my memory pills today because it's a cottage. Anyway, let me, I need the one thought before I went on the tangent. What were we talking about?
You were talking about the sadhana, that when we have our sadhana, what's the difference that one borns in a Brahmanic family and the other not, and he becomes
Yeah,
the
okay.
body. And you were talking about your friends that none of them become the
Yeah.
body, and you did. So what's the difference? What made the difference?
Yeah. So
And
this,
then you were talking about Prabhupada, the cooperation, like how
yeah. And
Prabhupada
after
likes
that,
to cooperate. Yeah.
you rewound it too far. It's fun. Anyway, I'll talk about that a little more because I'll try to get back, you know, we call up Zoom and tell them that our teacher forgets everything he says, and he needs to be able to just like have a button where he can go back and hear what he just said a minute ago. He's like an absent-minded professor. He needs that feature. Yeah. So we were um, we were talking about, what did I say to you, Annapurna? You remember I said something. What did I say? Maybe that will remind me. Or maybe stories arise. All right. We're all dumbstruck. Must be the stars. Isn't the stars today? You were asking if I could remember what I did 7 years ago. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, what was the point I was making? Yeah, I was trying to make this story. I was giving this whole lead up to why stories are so great, and now totally let you down. No, sorry, no story. The story will come. It has to come. Yeah. Okay. So let me just rewind the tape a little bit. Well, you guys are too young for tape. Uh, what do you call it now when it's digital? You don't call it rewind, do you? There's nothing to wind. What do you call it? Are we still use these old leftover terms like I'm making a new album? No, I'm not making an album. It's digitally uploaded. There's no album, but there's no physical album. Okay, rewind. We'll use rewind. There's no tape to rewind. So we were we were making the point, we're not trying to minimize effort. We're not trying to minimize sadhana. There's no question that these things are important. But sometimes there's ways of doing things where actually you get very little mercy or no mercy because it's not pleasing to Guru, it's not pleasing to Prabhupada. Oh, I can tell another story. This is not the story I was thinking of. But sometimes during Prabhupada's time, when there would be kirtan, the devotees would be very enthusiastic. I would say too enthusiastic. There is a point that something good can become bad, right? Like we say, anything good done too much can become bad, right? So their dancing was over the top. It went beyond what would be appropriate for Vaishnavas, and it kind of went into just common Western dancing mood, where devotees are like, the brahmacharis were on fire. Yeah, that was the problem. They were on fire. And just dancing like, I don't know, dogs or whatever. I don't know how to describe it. And they were fired up and enthusiastic. And Prabhupada said, stop, right in the middle of kirtan. He just stopped it. You know how this is how devotees were dancing. They were going up to one another. Like, instead of looking at the deities, okay, you're there, or let's say the deities are there. So instead of looking at the deities, they would go up to one another, they were dancing, they're going like this to one another, like they were boxing. And Prabhupada saw that. He said, stop the kirtan. He said, not like this, hands up like Lord Chaitanya. So you're in the kirtan chanting Hare Krishna and you're displeasing Prabhupada. Isn't that interesting? So some of you probably have had this experience with Prabhupada disciples that you think they're nitpicky and fanatical. You're doing something, go, not like that. We never did it like that in Prabhupada's time. And you just go, oh, he's an old fuddy-duddy, 10 years he'll be gone. We don't have to worry about him. It's like, whatever. Or I hope he doesn't come back tomorrow. But isn't it? But a lot of times that may be true, but a lot of times they know that Prabhupada wanted something a certain way. And he's like, don't do it like this way. It's not pleasing Prabhupada. Don't dance with your back to the deities. Face a deity. Don't dance like gorillas, like gorillas drank too much coffee, don't do that, You know what I mean? And so a lot of what goes on today in ISKCON, in the temples with twirling and spinning and breakdancing and all that, like Prabhupada would, stop it! Prabhupada would just stop it, It's like, so we think we're, I don't want to give you a whole lecture on the things Prabhupada doesn't like, because then you probably not want to get out of bed tomorrow. I can't do anything because I'll do something wrong. Which is pretty true, yeah, when you really get down to it, because we're not trained. But so that's one side of it, that's you don't want to make up ideas, make up philosophy, do things because Prabhupada may be displeased. And if you're having trouble in your spiritual life, that means probably there's something wrong and there's a lack of mercy that you need. And because when you have mercy, then things just happen like amazingly, like becomes very easy. So I can't remember that story. Krishna definitely doesn't want you to hear that story, because if you have not, it's just like, it's not meant to happen today. I don't know. He's just not giving it to me. So I'll go through the chat and see what's going on there. You were trying to remind me and it didn't work. So we stopped in the middle of the purport. We'll look at your questions or comments. Krishna Karshani on Facebook says, if somebody is becoming a devotee, that means this person got mercy. But if this person leaves, it means that the mercy was taken away. That's it. We can generalize. Yeah. One of the reasons it may be taken away is they just stop practicing. And then you could ask, well, was because it was taken away that they stopped practicing, or is it because they stopped practicing and then they didn't get the mercy? Well, it wouldn't be arbitrarily taken away. Every day Krishna chooses 10 devotees to take the mercy away. No, it's not like that. It would have to be some giving into some weakness or some slackness in their execution of their practice. But the point to remember is that, it's not our strength, but it's the mercy that's giving us the strength. And, in the Nectar of Devotion, it says that you can't get love of Krishna by your practice because Krishna has to give it to you. So how can you get anything when it's in the hands of somebody else? Right? You have to convince them to give it to you. You just can't, well, I want my father to give me something, so I will get straight A's, and then he'll give it to me. Well, maybe he will, but you can't demand that, right? Isn't it? Maybe he'll decide not to. It's up to him. So, it's like that with Krishna, That's why I was saying on Monday, when you help people become Krishna conscious, you can experience, it's almost like a drug, isn't it? When you help bring someone to Krishna consciousness, you feel different. You feel like, I feel like, that's how I used to feel when I used to take drugs. This is strange, what's going on here? Sometimes you think, oh, all the drugs I did something wrong and now all the drugs are resurging in my body. But I've seen, it's actually true. The drugs are, the hormones are like flying high. The mercy, it just becomes so inspired by When You Please Prabhupada that you almost feel like you're intoxicated. So if we're doing well in Krishna consciousness, that's a sign that we have the mercy. And if we need to do better, we need mercy. We need to pray for mercy also. Pray to Nityananda, to Balaram, especially on their appearance day. Okay. Tanya says, a couple of days ago, I met some old friends. At one point, the topic of Krishna consciousness came up and they started asking questions and I tried to answer as best I could, but whatever I said sounded terrible to them. And I had such a revelation. Krishna consciousness is so logical to devotees and so incredibly illogical to non-devotees. Goes against every principle of material life, and it's absolutely impossible to understand it by the mind and intelligence. And then you go out in the street, distribute books, and you start preaching to someone, and someone's like, yeah, I believe all this. Yeah, I believed all this since I was 7 years old. Yeah. Right. And then I thought, wow, a couple of years ago, I had the exact same mindset, and Krishna consciousness sounded just as dreadful to me as it did to them. It must have taken an unimaginable amount of mercy for me to be here now. Yeah. First time I hear the 4 regular principles, I said, those principles, I really like them, but I could never do them. I could never do all of them. That was my first response. So I wrote myself off, like, you're not going to be a devotee because you can't follow all those, although you'd like to. And one fine day I woke up after being in touch with the devotees for 6 weeks, and I was following them all. I go, well, that's interesting. How did that happen? Wasn't even trying to follow them. I mean, subconsciously, I wanted to follow them. So the power of mercy. I think Prabhupada clearly understood we were here by mercy, and the mercy was coming from our sadhana and his well wishes. At the same time, mercy is not so strong that you couldn't transcend mercy. It's possible. Well, I guess we wouldn't use the word transcend. I mean, we could use it as proper English, but we have to use the word descend. You could descend. You could go below the mercy. You could miss the mercy's coming and you could duck under, right? Or you could go to the side. You could avoid it. It's possible. Okay, I'm going to read the second part of that purport. So if you go back up in the chat, you'll see it there. Begins with the word tattva. The word tattva, meaning in reality, is very important. Tato mam tattvato gyatva. Unless one understands Krishna in truth by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is not free to give up his material body. As it is said, arurakrachena param padam tata padantyado andrita yushmad angraya. If one neglects to serve the lotus feet of Krishna, one cannot become free from the material clutches simply by knowledge. So I was just mentioning that, and this was one of the topics from last week's class. And so Prabhupada is referring to jnanis here, jnanis who become liberated by knowledge, by knowing what's right and what's wrong, and by discrete intelligence, giving up material life. But this verse says the word padantya means fall, padanti. Padant adho means down. Padantyadho means they fall down. Where do they fall down? Well, they were able to control themselves, and so they achieved Brahman liberation. They merged in Brahman because they became free from desire. But then padantyadho, they fall from that. Interesting, right? Why? Anadrita yushmarangraya. They neglected your lotus feet. So it was by their strength they got up there, but they didn't have enough strength to remain free from desire eternally. And they couldn't do that without bhakti. And so because they don't have bhakti, they're resting on knowledge only of, you know what it's like. I know I shouldn't eat those potato chips because every time I eat those potato chips, I fall asleep. And before I fall asleep, I start seeing double and triple. So that's what those potato chips do to me. So you're clear you shouldn't eat them. And then what do? Padantyado, you fall down. Right? Prabhu, I fell down today. Oh no, what did you do? What's her name? No, Lay's, what's her name? Her name's Lay. Lay what? Lay potato chips. No, it's not a woman, it's potato chips. So this is something that it's very important for us, and we all have experience of this, that knowing is only part of the equation. It's like, okay, how do I get to this place? Well, you take this road. I'm like, okay, thank you. Thanks for telling me. Well, you going? I don't know, I'll think about it. So knowing is just, okay, well, now I know how to get there. So you learn a verse, you listen to a class, you learn a purport. Does it mean you're going to do anything about it? Not necessarily, that's up to you, but at least you know what to do. So that's all knowledge really is, isn't it? Like, have you ever heard a class and did absolutely nothing different after the class? Of course, the answer is yes, Prabhu, every class, practically speaking. Yeah. There hasn't been a class that I've heard that I have actually done anything different. I just like to listen to class because I'm hopeful someday I'll do something different. So we know that problem, right? We know what a big problem it is, right? And of course, you need knowledge because you need to know how to get there if you do decide to get there. I mean, if you don't know how to get there, what's the use of deciding to get there? So knowledge is necessary. And knowledge is one of the ways we're able to practice detachment. But the difference between us and the jnanis is that knowledge brings us to bhakti. And with detachment, we can practice bhakti. And with bhakti, we can maintain our detachment. So detachment is what brought us, but detachment is not what keeps us. What got you to Krishna consciousness? Well, Prabhu, honestly, was my last girlfriend. She was a real witch. If it wasn't for her, I'd never become a devotee. Isn't it something like that? Yeah. Or my boyfriend, he was so abusive, but I have to thank him. He drove me against the wall, drove me crazy, and then I took shelter of Krishna. So that's part of jnana. It's acknowledging that the world is bad. Buddhism, it's all bad. It's all bad. World is miserable. Attachment causes suffering. The basic premise of Buddhism is suffering. It's all about suffering. So that's knowledge that things are bad in the material world. Sometimes you see devotees walking around. Oh, the sky's fallen, Prabhu. The sky's fallen. It's so bad. Vaccines, and COVID, and economy, and the pollution. It's just like it's bad. It's bad. It's bad. And that can be an impetus to move you away from Maya, right? But it's not going to keep you away from Maya. So that's where the jnanis have the problem. It gets them detached, but doesn't keep them detached. That's why this verse is there. Padancheto. They get to Brahman. How do you get to Brahman? You detach completely. You become free of material desire. Why would you have any material desire if everything is bad, right? What are you going to do? I'm going to do nothing. Why are you going to do nothing? Because everything is bad. Everything I do is bad. They don't know about devotional service, so they just stop doing everything and I'll just study Shastra and remain detached. Then they get perfectly detached. Then they get liberated. They go to Brahman. And then after a while, without the mercy of Krishna, without the shelter of his feet, padantyato, they come back. And when they come back, they engage in material activity. So for us, jnana, knowledge, it helps to get us into bhakti. But it's the bhakti that gives the mercy, that gives us the strength to follow knowledge. Because what's the use of knowledge if you don't have the strength to follow it? But if you get mercy, Prabhupada writes, and I'm sure we'll read this purports. He said, Krishna gives the weapon of knowledge and Balaram gives the strength to carry the weapon. Because what's the use of a weapon if you can't lift it? Right? Isn't it? Like I know 4,086 shlokas. Well, what's the use if you don't follow any of them? There is no use, right? So it's like that. So Krishna gives the gyan, the knowledge, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And Balaram gives the power to act on that knowledge. Because if you don't act on the knowledge, then as it says, you're as good as the person who doesn't have the knowledge, right? Like what's the difference between you and the person who doesn't know how to get to that city if you're not going to go? Fundamentally, no difference. Only that potentially you could go, but practically, as we're in real time today, right now, in real time, there's no difference because you're not going anywhere. You're not acting on that knowledge. So if you ever know something, but you can't act on it, then pray for mercy because that's what's missing in the equation, right? So everything depends on mercy. And if you ever say, which I'm sure you will say and have said, I can't do that, then rewrite that equation and say, I can't do that unless I get Krishna's mercy. Just, to finish the sentence. I could never, Annapurna, when you're older, I want you to be guru. I could never do that. But just end it with, unless I get Krishna's mercy, and then that will be fine, right? Sujan, 25 years, I want you to take sannyas. I can never do that unless I get Krishna's mercy. Yeah, so the first part of the sentence is true. I'm not arguing with the first part. But the second part of the sentence is also true, isn't it? They're both true. So that's the idea. I could never do that unless I get Krishna's mercy. And so if you're having trouble doing something, then we're missing and we're deficient in the mercy department. I need more mercy vitamins and minerals. That's the idea. So the purport continues. This is a short class today. Every Wednesday for so many weeks, I'm taking a class in conflict resolution. So it ends at 10. So we have a half hour less. Even if one attains the stage of Brahma Padam, merging in Brahman, without bhakti, he is prone to fall down. One must be very careful in regard to the danger of falling down again into material bondage. The only insurance is to come to the stage of bhakti, from which one is sure not to fall. Then one is free from the activities of the material world. In summary, as stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one must get in touch with a bona fide spiritual master coming in the parampara of Krishna consciousness. For by his mercy and instructions, one is able to get strength from Krishna. Thus, one engages in devotional service and attains the ultimate goal of life, the lotus feet of Vishnu. Okay, Yasya Prasada, Bhagavat Prasada. You know that verse. Krishna Karshani says, yeah, we read that question. Again, in Krishna's mercy, we can understand Krishna. Can't remember that story. It's amazing. I get so excited when I speak. I can't remember what I say. Like sometimes someone's translating and say, could you repeat that? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what I said. Isn't that interesting? There must be some psychological state to define that. Srujan. What does Shrujan mean? One who hears? You don't know? Like Shrut, Shruti,
In
person.
Shrujan in Sanskrit means creation. In Gujarati, it means nice person, which I am not. But according to this Gujarati, my family I belong to Gujarati family. So
Nice person. Oh, Shru, like Su, like Shu is like good. Like in Sanskrit, it would be Sujan. Good-hearted person. Okay. If Nityananda Prabhu forgives unlimitedly, then why devotees leave ISKCON? Because they want to. Why do you do anything? Because you want to. Or you might say you don't want to, but Lord Chaitanya kicked you out because you made so many offenses. That's possible, you know. Come back and Lord Chaitanya says, if you're going to hang around and offend devotees, then, you know, come back in another lifetime, you know, or get out of ISKCON and go on Facebook and start, you know, making all your offenses, but at least, you know, don't be near devotees. One of the most blasphemous devotees known to mankind is someone I happened to bring to Krishna consciousness. So I had something to do with his becoming a devotee. That wasn't a mistake if I ever made one. And I saw him a few years ago and he said, you must be lamenting that you made me a devotee, right? Because he's always criticizing me because he doesn't like Jewish people and he doesn't like gurus. So I'm double trouble for him. So that was, I thought that was funny. At least he has a sense of humor. Mercy is more important than knowledge, definitely. Bhakti is more important than knowledge, and by bhakti you get mercy. Okay. Sydney, you're forgiven this time. Okay. So maybe we can wrap it up. We have 5 minutes. I'll tell you something that's interesting. I believe Jiva Goswami explained. He said that the impersonalists, they understand that through bhakti you get mercy. So a lot of them do bhakti to get mercy to merge into Krishna, like they use bhakti for their own purpose, but they know they need bhakti because through bhakti they get mercy and they know you can't just do it. So sometimes bhakti is used, strangely enough, to further support their jnana and their renunciation and their becoming one with Krishna. Strange world, isn't it? You notice the world's strange, right? Things are backwards, upside down. They don't always make sense. They don't go direct. Yeah. But I think one thing we can take away from today's class is we understand the importance of mercy, and that therefore the logical conclusion is to pray for mercy. Like, you should always pray for mercy. And I think sometimes devotees, they get so low, they don't even think they should pray for mercy, or they deserve to pray for mercy, or it's like they're too low that mercy could even do anything. No, don't ever feel that way, right? The lower you feel, the more heartfelt you can pray. And we all need mercy. And even Prabhupada set the example when he asked his disciple, pray for me. And when he said, I'm always praying to Krishna that I don't fall down. And Prabhupada, he liked to chant the prayers of the acharyas, and all the prayers were all prayers for mercy. So it's even very advanced devotees pray for mercy. I don't know if you know this, but I've mentioned it. It was one of the most amazing things that I read about the holy name was that Takaharidas was praying to Lord Chaitanya for mercy, to be able to chant, like he was praying for mercy to get a taste. He chants 192 rounds, and he's praying for mercy to get a taste. So you may remember that I once told you that no matter how high you go, you'll always feel like I'm nowhere. You'll always have that feeling like there's more to go. It's never going to go away. Even Takaharidas is thinking, I don't have a taste. Is that crazy? You might think, well, I thought, someday I'll actually get a taste, and that feeling will go away. And Takaharidas, who has probably the highest taste, is feeling that I don't have a taste. So even he's praying for mercy. So praying for mercy is never going to stop, right? I think what we should do today for japa, I think it would be good that we pray for mercy to get the mercy of the holy name, because sometimes that's the perfect thing to pray for. So I think we're unofficially starting, right? Did we start over again, Anuradha?
I'm just going to finish the broadcast, so Goramani
Okay,
can start a new one.
We'll finish the broadcast and then we'll
Yeah,
start
one
a new one. Before we start a new one,